Welcome back. You're watching Channel 1 Liverpool with me, Rifat Malik. Channel 1 Tobruk. Channel 1 Albert Dock. Time to take a look at the headlines now.
Hello and salam. Welcome to the Muslim Viewpoint, powered by American Muslim Today. Hello and welcome. Today's Muslim Viewpoint guest is Laura Jones, and she's running for U.S. Congress in Texas District 8, which includes Walker, Montgomery, and San Jacinto counties and parts of Harris County. Laura, tell us a little bit about your background and why you decided to run for this office, and if you've held any previous offices that might be relevant to your candidacy.
All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast today. I want to say that first and foremost. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. I'm a native Texan. Grew up in a city full of millions of people. And my husband and I, about 8 years ago, decided that Houston was getting a little bit too crowded. Our 6 children had pretty much grown up and moved out of the house. So we found a small piece of property in a rural community, which is in San Jacinto County. It's about 2 hours from Houston. And so moving from a major metropolitan area where everything is at your fingertips to a small rural community that lacks a lot of access to a lot of things, my eyes were opened. I didn't realize that people lived without high-speed internet. They lived without a hospital or an emergency room or even an urgent care clinic in their community. Veterans were having to drive 2 hours to go to the VA clinic. And just across the board. So I became a community advocate. I became someone that began to speak out and speak up on the things that were going on in rural communities that people in major cities didn't know anything about. I had the opportunity of getting involved in my new community. I began volunteering at food pantries. I serve on the water board in my community and another board for a community center. And I was offered the opportunity to serve as a Democratic county chair for my small rural community of about 30,000 people. So in my effort to try to figure things out, I wasn't a political activist before moving. I did vote, but my husband and I both were busy working, raising our kids, just living life when we lived in Houston. So serving as the Democratic county chair, I realized how much disparity there was, how much there was lack of access to so many things, mainly infrastructure, for political candidates to run and get elected in areas that weren't considered Democratic areas or blue areas. So after about a year of building alliances in rural counties with other rural people, trying to find solutions around not having high-speed internet and being able to access the Voter Action Network, which is the platform that the Democrats use to reach out to voters and things like that. You need internet for that. So I traveled around East Texas, met lots and lots of people, talked to people about what it was like to live in a rural community because I wanted to understand how to come up with a solution with others. And after about a year, I decided I'd done as much as I could in this volunteer position and decided I would step up and run for office. So I would be able to have a bigger platform. So I'd be able to interact with people at different levels.
Okay. So your opponent is sitting Congressman Morgan Luttrell. So what do you think that you bring to the table that perhaps he lacks?
Well, I am an everyday average American. I'm a mother, a wife, 6 children. 2 of my children served in the U.S. military. I've held a number of jobs in the service industry. I'm a regular person, so my life experience is very similar to a lot of Americans' life experience. The sitting congressman is a retired Navy SEAL, and I kind of feel like I have my thumb on the pulse of what's going on with the people in my community and even in Harris County. I spent a lot of time volunteering in different communities to be where the people were, to understand what was important to them. I've spent the past 6 years traveling around, talking with people and meeting with people so that I could understand how best to serve them, because I am interviewing for this job. And I don't see my opponent, the sitting congressman, doing that. I haven't seen him do that from the beginning. So I feel like I'm uniquely qualified. I was born and raised in Houston, so the district's about half rural and half suburban. So, you know, being born and raised in Houston and now living in a rural community, I feel I'm uniquely qualified to serve in this position.
So you're running on your running platform is focused on education, individual freedom, and healthcare. Tell us more about these issues and how they impact your constituents.
Well, women's rights, huge. You know, as a woman, I don't believe that my rights should be limited, or the rights of any woman should be limited. And that crosses across party lines. It doesn't matter if you live in a rural community or a major metropolitan area. You know, women are not second-class citizens. They deserve equal rights. Healthcare is another thing. Healthcare is a human right. In my rural community, as I mentioned, and like many rural communities in Texas, there's no access to a hospital, to an emergency room, to an urgent care clinic, and you're traveling an hour and a half or 2 hours to get to a hospital. And if you live in Houston or Dallas or San Antonio here in Texas, some of these major metropolitan areas, if you are someone that is uninsured or underinsured, you may live down the street from a fantastic hospital, but if you can't afford care, you lack access. Public education is huge. You know, I grew up in the public education system, my parents, my children. Again, and if vouchers come in and take away access to public education, it's going to hurt a lot of people living here in Texas. So I'm an advocate for public education, giving our teachers raises and support staff. They have such an important job in raising and educating and forming our children's view of the world.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, you talk about education. Well, currently we're seeing global issues impacting our local communities, particularly here in Texas, well, just as all the states across the country, to be honest, but where we're seeing students being arrested on university campuses. I'm sure you might be aware, but over here in Dallas, where we are, a number of students, I think nearly 20, were released yesterday after being arrested overnight for protesting peacefully at the University of Texas at Dallas. And obviously they were fighting for, or protesting for rather, the rights, human rights in other parts of the world, particularly Gaza. And their argument was that, you know, America is contributing to military aid for the country that they believe is, is carrying out the bombing campaign against civilians in Gaza. We know that some of the universities have their funding, or they all are also connected with companies that are, have connections with Gaza, and the students are calling for a divestment and also disclosure of that information. What is your view on the rights of these students, constitutional rights to protest, and what is your view on the response by whether it's college administrations or whether it's law enforcement or even the government for that matter?
Oh, as Americans, we have the right to free speech. So these students have the right to peacefully protest. What we're seeing in some of these protests that are going on is there are troublemakers that are showing up that are not students, people that are maybe driving across state lines to cause problems, to get news media coverage, to blow things out of proportion. This has happened in the recent past with other types of protests that were going on. And there's violence that's happening. And it's not the students that are causing the violence, but it's that group of people that are intentionally creating chaos and having violence introduced into something that should just be a peaceful protest.
And what is your view on the actual issue that they're protesting about? What do you think about this government's involvement in funding Israel's military action and obviously because that's our tax dollars as Americans, we're also paying for that. What is your view on the government's policy towards Israel? I know that President Biden has called for a ceasefire, and that has been rejected so far by Israel. And also, he's also asked for them to allow military humanitarian aid, and that so far has still been blocked. So what do you think about the position of that Israel is taking, and our government's position on how we are still, basically supporting Israel?
Well, I'm in support of ceasefire. This is a humanitarian crisis, and there are people that are being killed, and I want the killing to stop. This is an issue that hasn't been addressed or solved in decades. There have been many presidents that have sat for 4 years or 8 years in terms, and they haven't addressed this issue. They haven't solved this problem. But we need the killing to stop, and the aid should be allowed to reach the people that need it.
Okay. Just final question for you, Laura. I just wanted to ask about gun reform. Obviously, it's a very important issue across the country. It's an important issue in Texas in particular. We've had a significant number of serious, mass shooting incidents, a number here actually in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and some that have impacted our audience, our community, which is the Muslim community. What is your position on open carry? What do you think? Do you think we need stricter legislation or reforms, and how would that look?
Yes, absolutely. We need common sense gun legislation to be introduced and passed. There's no reason that people should be losing their lives, that our children should be losing their lives in schools. The mental health aspect of what's been going on with these mass shootings, a lot of these perpetrators could have been stopped. Had there been certain laws or policies in place where if someone calls and says, I'm fearful about this person getting access to a gun, and then 3 months or 6 months later, this person shows up to a school or a movie theater and murders people, this can be stopped. I would like to see the red flag system implemented, and I would like to see more of a mental health database put into place so that people can be flagged if they have a history of violence or if they have a history of mental illness. They should not have access to firearms. Even suicide is a huge, huge issue for people that have access to guns. There are people that can go buy a firearm who are suicidal, and their family members are very concerned about their mental health, and they shouldn't be able to access a firearm and take their own life as well.
Okay, absolutely. Couldn't agree. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time out to speak to our audience, and very good luck to you with your campaign.
Well, thank you so much.